Theos, Derek, and Seda continued alone with Sam and Givas flying high overhead, and Neelis following close behind. They went deep into the swamp, far from the shadow of the giant tree. There were trees with large, sweet-smelling flowers. Their leaves danced in the muggy breeze that blew over the group as they trudged through the murky water. There were floating houses all along the shore, and moss hanging from every tree and roof. They heard a splash from the water nearby, and as Seda turned toward the sound, an alligator rushed them. The boys scattered as Theos went for his sword, but Derek had been faster, and tossed the beast back into the water. As everyone regrouped, Theos scanned the water. "We are surrounded again," he said, looking to Neelis. The birds were still overhead. They had seen the commotion, and rather than jump in the fray, they opted to observe from nearby branches. The water around them became dotted with eyes as one by one alligators drifted up from the murky depths, drawn in by the splashing of the attack. "We are here to talk with Sobek," Derek yelled as the alligator turned and hissed at him. The alligator began to slowly drift toward the group, changing to his human form as he did so. "What business do you boys have with Big Daddy Sobek?" the alligator hissed. "I am Derek of the Wine, grandson of Max, and I am here to ask that he grant our merchants safe passage to the sea." The alligator smiled a snaggle-toothed grin, and Theos used his dark gift to scan the alligator's eyes before turning his attention back to the murky waters around them. He saw that the alligator expected a reward for bringing Derek to Sobek, and considered killing him, but remembered why they were there, and instead he followed his brother's lead. The alligator led them to a large sandbar that forked the river with the sun beating down on it, and a large tree laid over it. As the group got closer, Sam noticed the sandbar and flew over it, making sure no one was laying in wait on the far side of the tree. As he turned back toward the group in flight, he was horrified by what he saw. What he thought was a fallen tree was in fact a sleeping giant. He called an alarm call to Theos, who looked up and locked eyes with him, reading Sam's message as he flew over them and circled back around to a branch on the far bank. Theos responded with a nod. The alligator that had led them there hissed and roused Sobek from his slumber. Sobek snapped at him with his jaws that clapped like thunder before resuming human form, wiping the sleep from his eyes. Even as a man, he was giant, easily dwarfing Neelis. "Boy, you better have a good reason for waking me from my nap." "Why, yes, sir. These fine boys are from that clan in the forest that makes the wine we enjoy," the first alligator said. Well, is that so? Do come in, boys. What can I do for you on this fine evening?" Sobek said with an unsettling smile as he changed back and slithered in and then immediately back out of the water on the opposite side of the river. Everyone crossed the river to the opposite shore, and Sobek nodded to a large shack with an open door. They could see some chairs around a tree stump that had been fashioned into a jagged table of sorts. "Sit down and let me get you a bite to eat." Sobek pulled a knife that could have easily been considered a short sword and began carving a large golden-brown hunk of meat that he retrieved from a smoldering fire and bid them to eat. "This is delicious," Seda said as he swallowed a large bite. "What is it?" "Alligator tail. Nothing like it. The young ones have the most tender meat you will ever eat." The boys were both horrified and disgusted with Sobek's reply. "That is what happens to you here in the swamp when you bite off a little more than you can chew," Sobek replied to their horrified looks. Neelis was visibly nervous now, and the fireflies seemed to respond to his nervousness as the swarm among the trees seemed to grow in intensity. The alligator that brought them began to sit down, but Sobek stopped him, telling him to go and call the kin for supper. "Sobek, of the alligator clan," Derek began as the first alligator exited the shack of the swamp. Sobek interrupted as he smiled at Derek condescendingly. "Sobek of the swamp. My name is Derek of the Wine, and I am here to negotiate an agreement on the safe passage of our merchants through this swamp, as well as compensation for our losses." "Your losses? Why are your losses any concern of mine? Unless I am to presume you are blaming me and my kin for the incompetence of your merchants." "Your clan has been involved in several attacks on our merchants, yes," Derek replied calmly. "What proof do you have that it was my clan that took your wine, and not any of the other numerous clans in these swamps?" I mean, the swamp is a dangerous place even for forest boys like yourselves. Accounts from survivors, Derek replied. Why? There are 5 different clans of scales in this swamp. 12 if you count the snakes, turtles, and loudmouthed frogs. Any one of those gators could have your merchandise. And suppose we buy our wine from one of those other gators. Now is it our fault that they just happened to steal it from you? For that matter, how are we supposed to know it is stolen? Stop being coy. Theos growled, making Sobek turn his attention to him. Theos had been reading him and gritting his teeth. He knew Sobek was lying, and worse yet, he was stalling. Nilus knew it as well. And just who are you? Sobek hissed in surprise. I am no one. Theos replied, shifting his gaze and retaking his seat. Just a forest fox sent to escort Master Derek. Well, you should remember your manners, little fox. You are in my home after all. Sobek snapped. I apologize for my escort's rudeness, but he is right. If we had any doubts as to who was responsible, Lai would not be here. Derek continued. Well, if you insist that your claim is true, then I guess I have no choice. You will pay us for our losses and grant us safe passage. Derek began, but Theos stood again and stepped in front of his brother, putting his hand on his sword. He had read the alligator, and he knew this was not the case. No, I am afraid I have a better idea. I am going to have to skin your friend there alive and send his fur back to your clan with the demands for your ransom written on the hide. Theos made a lunge for Sobek, as did Seda, as Derek drew his mother's sword. Sobek swatted Seda with his tail and slammed him into the wall. Then he grabbed a large knife and bore down on Theos, who met it with a blade of his own. Theos let the beast within him loose and changed to the monster fox as Derek staggered Sobek with a harsh gust. Sobek changed as well and brought his jaws down hard on Theos' right arm, giving a swift jerk, and would have torn it off had Nilus not jumped on Sobek's back and rove a blade deep into the back of his neck. Theos yelped as Sobek opened his mouth, releasing him. Then Theos rolled under him and sunk his teeth into the behemoth's throat. Nilus freed his sword and pinned Sobek's flailing tail as Sam flew through the door to warn the boys of an ambush. Sam changed from bard to man and pulled a pair of daggers from his waist, driving them into Sobek's belly, and held the behemoth up, allowing Theos to release Sobek's throat as blood covered the floor. Sam's shadow stepped out of the way, using the light cast by the fireflies to get out from under him as Sobek's mouth fell open and he hissed his dying breath. Derek looked into his brother's eyes as he pulled his head out from under the giant, fearful he would not change back. Nilus stepped in front of Derek with his sword drawn as Sam's shadow stepped in front of Theos with a blade of his own. There was a tense moment as the two men locked eyes, and the monster fox jerked his head away from Derek's gaze. The brief meeting of Derek's eyes with Theos had been enough to return him to his human form. Theos screamed out in pain as he regained control and returned to his human form. His right arm was a mangled puzzle of tendon, meat, and bone. Theos, calm down, we have to go. More alligators are coming. Nilus said as he went to help Seda up. We have to get you and your brother out of here. Theos began to tremble as he looked at his arm, but instinct took over, and he reached for some wet sand from the floor of the large shack and began to chant. That's moth magic, Sam thought to himself as Derek joined in. The brothers were able to stop the bleeding and even regrow and reshape the flesh, but Theos still could not feel his arm very well, and he could tell the bones in it were still very broken. As the group fled the shack, they realized they were surrounded with alligators and river wolves clashing in the water all around them. This way. Givers called from above the chaos. Sam, get Derek and Seda out of here, Theos commanded. Sam and Nilus turned to look at him as Theos began to draw in the sand with his left hand. What are you planning to do, Theos? You cannot take the entire clan on by yourself. Even with the beast you are still. Sam, go. Theos barked in a tone that chilled both Sam and Nilus to the bone. Theos, Seda wheezed in protest. His ribs were broken, making it hard for him to breathe. I will be right behind you now, trust me, and go. Sam, Derek, and Neelis all used their shadow step to get away as both Seda and Givus changed to their animal forms and left the shack. Theos went back in. He walked over to Sobek's body and reopened one of the wounds on his right hand, then carefully let the blood drip into the pool on the floor. Buse and Rio Lobo, I thank you both for teaching me, and I really hope this works. Theos said to himself as he used the power of the desert buzzard's blood magic to manipulate Sobek's blood, pulling it all from his body. The sun outside began to fade as crimson storm clouds began to gather. I have a bad feeling about this, Sam cawed as he and Neelis moved quietly through the swamp. Theos had that look in his eye. He is reckless when he gets like this. What do you mean? Neelis asked. He goes too far. He has entirely too much power for a boy. Sam replied as thunder cracked the sky and a red rain began to fall. An alligator had been stalking Seda as he followed Givus through the swamp, but stopped his advance and looked up to the sky as the droplets of blood began to splash on his scales. Then he and the rest of the clan of Scales began to choke and gag as the blood made its way from their skin into their mouths. Theos came into view of the river wolves now as the group struggled to help its fallen members. The alligators turned to him, snapping and hissing, and as they did, Theos clenched his left hand into a fist, and the alligators burst as if they were nothing more than bubbles in the river. One of them had made it to the bank and was preparing to lunge at Theos. His blood covered the fox, and the remaining members of the alligator clan slipped into the trees and the water as fast as they could. The red rain intensified, and one by one they all began to choke on the blood that fell from the sky until there was no one left in Theos's wake. Seda and Givus reached the area Sam, Neelis, and Derek had opted to wait in. They were all beneath the roots of a fallen tree around a bend in the river. Neelis thought it best they remain hidden as he consulted a firefly that landed on his shoulder, and the red rain began to fall. What happened? Where is my brother? Derek asked as Seda reached them. Seda shook his head, not sure what to say. I am going back for him, Sam cawed as he took to the sky. He flew 10 yards back the way he came and found Theos and the river wolves. His grey fur had been stained crimson and had become matted with the blood of his victims. You used the buzzard's sacred blood magic with the rain magic you learned from Rio Lobo, Sam said, admiring Theos' cleverness. Do you think me a monster, Sam? Theos asked as he looked up at the crow with shame in his eyes. No, but you have quite the flair for the dramatic, Sam replied with a smile. Neelis and the others are up ahead. It rained blood in the swamp for 2 days as Theos hunted and choked the life from the alligator clan with his crimson clouds, sparing only the young. It was only at the request of the Panther clan that the rain stopped and rumors began to fly in the swamp about the murderous Silver Wisp. Neelis and Derek returned to the forest, and Oxel seemed pleased with the way Derek had handled himself. What of your brother Theos? Is he still alive? Alive and well. He said he was going to the north to stay with Aunt Snow for a while, Derek replied. To the north? Oxel said with his feigned interest giving way to genuine intrigue. Does he not know what your father did to the Council of Fangs and Claws? I believe he is well informed, brother, Neelis replied. Very well. I suppose it is no concern of mine, Oxel replied. Must we go north, Theos? Sam grumbled as he sat on Theos' shoulder. Theos was afraid to change to a fox, fearing his right arm could not support his weight. So he walked as a man up the rough-cut trails of the snowy northern mountains after stopping in the desert and having a moth make a second attempt to heal his arm with proper moth magic. The moth had managed to mend his bones, but his right arm was still horribly scarred, and he had lost sensation from the elbow down. That is where my Aunt Snow and all of my cousins are. Until I learn to hunt like this, I may need some help. So yes, unless you want to hunt for the both of us. What about the river wolves? Sam asked, dreading the cold ahead of him. Sam, you know what would happen if I returned to the river wolves maimed like this. They do not tolerate weakness, and I do not want to put Rio Lobo in that position. After what you did in the swamp, they might have made an exception. Sam chuckled. Theos knew they would have. Seda had said as much before they parted ways, But Theos wanted to consult a moth in the desert to see if his arm might be better healed than the rush job he and his brother had performed. Before leaving the forest on their way to the desert, Sam procured cloaks with hoods to hide Theos from the Aranim. The moth they found tried his best, but Theos feared he may never be able to swim properly or wield a sword again. "Can you feel your right hand at all?" Sam asked as he adjusted his feet on Theos's shoulders. "Barely. I can move it, but it's numb from the elbow down. I do not think I will be able to hold a sword. But at least the bones are not broken anymore." The two continued north for a week, having to bed down once for a few days because of a snowstorm. By the time they reached the fox village, they had eaten all the food they had brought with them. And having only managed to kill a rabbit and split it between the two of them, they were nearly starved to death. They reached the place Theos remembered visiting in his childhood. He had only met his Aunt Snow and his older cousins Jade, Azure, Violet, and Ivory once before when he was very little. Derek was still a newborn. Azure was the only boy of the litter. He and Theos got along very well, but his favorite of the four pups was his cousin Ivory, a short-haired fox that was always cold and the punchline for many cruel jokes from her long-haired siblings. Theos knocked on the door and Lily answered. When her eyes met Theos, they widened with terror. "No, you are dead. Leave me alone, Zion." She slammed the door shut as a female voice from the other side said, "Who is it, Mother?" Theos and Sam waited a moment, and the door opened again. Theos scarcely recognized his cousin Violet as she answered the door. "Theos, is that you, Violet?" Theos said with a grin. Violet grabbed him and pulled him and Sam inside, slamming the door behind her. "Did anyone see you come here?" she asked as she comforted Snow, who seemed to be in a panic, rocking with her hands on her head. "Calm down, Mother. This is Zion's son, Theos. What is wrong with her?" Theos asked, not sure what to make of Lily's panic. "She got lost in a blizzard 2 years ago, and she has not been right since." "Theos, did anyone see you come here?" Violet asked again. There was urgency in her voice that caused Theos to read her. "No one saw me," Theos said firmly. "Are you sure, Theos? An old woman pointed me in the right direction, that is all." "Good, we will hide you until nightfall, then I have to ask you to leave." "Violet, I am hurt," Theos began. "You are supposed to be dead." That is what the wolf leading the desert told the Council of Fangs and Claws when they sent summonses for the Desert King, Sheen. Why would he say I was dead? Because the Fangs and Claws of the North want you dead to pay for your father's crimes. Our family cannot go into other clans' villages. We cannot trade for food anymore. And what is worse, the White Fox are hunted for food and fur now as well. They got Jade last year. I heard the bears that caught her had mercy enough to kill her before taking her fur. Why not flee to the desert?" Theos asked, "and leave our home? You know nothing of northern heritage." Violet barked. "Our grandfather left," Theos replied. "He left to protect my mother, something your father made sure he did in vain when he massacred the northern wolves."